Join us in Omaha, Nebraska on Saturday, October 8th, 2022, as I'm proud to present Historic Haunted Heartland, a night of incredible true stories of paranormal phenomena, with not one, not two, but three paranormal experts alive on stage at the newly renovated and beautiful Benson Theater in the heart of Omaha. The fun starts with Omaha historian and paranormal investigator Jamie Nestrel as she reveals the true details on the dark history of Omaha. Next, Johnny Hauser, the longtime caretaker and nation's leading expert on the Villisca Axe Murder House. We're going to explore the crimes committed there with him and the history of its haunting. And finally, making his debut in Omaha, John E. L. Tenney will deliver one of his signature weird lectures. Tickets are available this summer, and I invite you to visit Necronomicast.com and follow the show on Facebook for more information. Historic Haunted Heartland, brought to you by Necronomicast, Saturday, October 8th, 2022, a night that could change your life or afterlife. From the historic Haunted Heartland of Omaha, Nebraska, my name is Brian Corey, and it's my pleasure to welcome you all to this episode of the Necronomicast. Tonight, I welcome Alexis Linkletter. She's an investigative journalist, a writer, a podcast host, and a producer. She hosts the top-rated true crime podcasts Unraveled and The First Degree, and her work has been televised on Unmasking a Killer and is featured on the Unraveled television series from Investigation Discovery and Discovery Plus. Together, we're going to explore some of the more infamous cases that she's covered in her career and discuss her methods of investigating and reporting these stories to the public. So between the producing, the podcast, the documentary specials, and being on-camera talent, she has a lot of stories running around in her mind ready to be told. But as Alexis will soon tell you, there's always room for one more. And now calling in on the Necronomicast hotline, I'm so excited to have from Burbank, California, Alexis Linkletter. How are you tonight?
I am wonderful. How are you?
Good. I'm so excited to have you as part of the program. I've really enjoyed the content that you and your podcast partner, your television production partner, Billy Jensen, have been putting out. So I really look forward to this conversation because you've got a lot of content out there.
Lots of content. Thank you for the kind words about it. It was a slog, but we got through it.
And I know I'd be remiss if I didn't mention your famous last name, Linkletter. You're related to the great Art Linkletter.
I am. He was my great-grandfather.
My dad was much older than other kids as dads when I was growing up, and he met Art. I don't remember where. My dad was a musician, and he tried out successfully one time to be an act at Disneyland.
Really?
Yeah, he might have met him there, but he was also on a real early incantation of Queen for a Day with Jack Bailey, and I think I always get my dad's stories mixed up. He died when I was 15, but I remember him talking about Art Linkletter this and Art Linkletter that. So
he was wonderful.
Cool.
He was wonderful.
All right. So you've got all these specials, you've got all these podcasts. How did you get to become so involved in the world of true crime and all this investigative reporting? What was your background starting before these shows came out?
Sure. So I was a communications and journalism major in college. And then one of my first jobs in entertainment was I was working at Discovery Studios as an assistant to two executive producers. And we were doing unscripted content. And after that job, I got a job on a true crime show. That was like my first producer job. And then I just sort of fell in love with it from there and then got more and more involved and took more active roles in each of the shows I was producing. And then, I started The First Degree, which is my weekly true crime podcast. And I was sort of running that show and it just grew from there. I kept falling in love with cases. And several of the cases we did for Unraveled, I discovered through The First Degree. And I just would get very immersed, and I'm really good with people and I have a good bedside manner. And, I just got sucked into some of these big stories and really just decided to pursue them much deeper. And that's what Unraveled really was. It was a deep dive into some cases that had system questioning components. And that was sort of a genre of true crime that I'm most passionate about.
Now, your partner with a lot of this is Billy Jensen, and I've done a lot of reading and research on him. How did you guys get together and form this partnership on your shows?
So Billy and I met when I was working on a show called Unmasking a Killer that was for CNN and for HLN. And he, at the time, was finishing I'll Be Gone in the Dark, which was Michelle McNamara's book. Mm-hmm. And this was prior to the arrest and identification of Joseph D'Angelo, who's the Golden State Killer. So he and I met several times to discuss, how we could help each other with those projects and share information and sort of, that sort of thing. And our relationship just grew from there. Then we did the first degree together, and, it seemed like a natural fit with Unraveled, with us both being from Long Island. And he actually was reporting on several aspects of the Long Island serial killer case, 20 years ago, when he was working with various Long Island newspapers.
Incredible content that you guys are putting together. What I like about your shows that you have, obviously I'm into podcasts. And so I really like the long form, like stretching out the case and talking about them over 6-7 episodes, all these different cases that you've gone over. But then I also like true crime documentaries. And so you put together these great 2-hour case studies of these cases that go hand in hand with these podcasts. So if you just want to watch a 2-hour documentary, great. If you want to go deep dive and get 6 episodes or more, fantastic. Or you could be like me and listen to them and watch them. So you could get kind of like the full picture of everything that goes into the investigation. Because I'm sure with the constraints of television, you have to, kind of whittle some stuff down and maybe not explore topics as much as you can on a podcast. So is the consideration of the story like the podcast first, and then you kind of do the TV, or do you work hand in hand with them at the same time?
We would do them at the same time. So as we were shooting the TV special, it's 2 hours. We shoot dozens and dozens of hours of content for each story we're doing. So we would use that audio to then cut the podcast together. So we would shoot it all at the same time. Some things we could only do phone calls, and, that we did in advance, but we made them together, and they were bought, together as a sort of, it was a companion podcast. And you nailed it when you said, if people want to do a deep dive, they're welcome to. If they listen to the podcast first and they want to put faces to the names, there's a way to do that with the doc. So it sort of was an experiment in seeing how these two mediums could work together to help improve or better or strengthen storytelling, I guess.
Mm-hmm. You kind of brought it up a minute ago, but how do you pick these cases, or what kind of cases are you drawn to? How do you decide, like, this is what we're going to spend a considerable amount of time and effort on to present this, content to the public? How do you guys, whittle down the cases? I'm sure you probably have like a spreadsheet or a list of different things that you're interested in and you want to tackle and cover. What are you drawn to, and how do you make the determination what to do?
Well, you'd be surprised. There aren't a ton of cases that are layered enough and intricate enough for, let's say, 9 hours, which is sort of the standard. A 7-part podcast, 2-hour special. Most cases don't take you that deep. So it needed to be something really layered. The Long Island serial killer case I was trying to do a project on that story for about 5 years. So that one I'd been working on for forever, trying to make that happen. And that one just seemed like a no-brainer because there's a real call to action with that one. That case hasn't been solved. Mm-hmm. And I think we're zeroing in on why that case hasn't been solved. And that's, kind of the question we answer in Unraveled Long Island Serial Killer. So that's how we got that one. And the other ones, it's sort of the same thing. A case comes across, and then a case comes across your desk, and you do research, and then you just fall down a rabbit hole. It's the cases that have dozens and dozens of pages of Reddit threads. Just cases people get lost in are really the ones that we gravitate towards most. And then, of course, we're always looking we don't want to just tell a story of something gratuitous or of someone's pain. We want a call to action. We want the case to have a system question and component, something where there's an answer to the question of what was wrong that allowed this to happen, that we can draw attention to and shed light on. So I think those are the main criteria. that we strive to meet with each Unraveled.
With these cases, one thing I'm impressed with, and I'm drawn to these kind of specials or shows or podcasts where the victim isn't lost in telling of the story. Because a lot of times, I'm sure you've seen the stories too, or the shows too, where you focus on Ted Bundy or you focus on John Wayne Gacy. You focus on the criminal and the criminal acts and not so much the victim, the lives that they led, and the repercussions that the survivors or the community at large has to deal with afterwards. And one thing I thought was great about your shows, and we can start pulling those apart in a little bit, you are very front and center with the victims and their stories and the ramifications that these events happen or what happens to the communities, the cities, the families. So I got to hand it to you. Those are the kind of shows that personally I'm interested in. Of course, the crime is interesting and you're always wondering about human nature and the human condition and what drives people to do these things. And so you talk about the killer's motivations. But what's great is that the story of the victims, their families, the real life situations aren't lost. And you even featured them like on the last part of some of your shows. Like you show family photos and everything of all these victims and their families, which I got to hand it to you. I think that's a nice touch. It's needed in like true crime entertainment.
Yeah, I think that was always a priority for us. Billy, early in his career, decided he was just going to do unsolved cases because he didn't like the idea of chasing down a family member and getting a comment on something that, they're just trying to put behind them. They're just, but like unsolved cases is all about the victim, getting justice for a victim. And I think that's always been kind of a priority. And I think in certain instances, it is important, as you say, to deconstruct sort of the criminal, especially if there's something to answer there, a question to be answered. But for the most part, I think, the homicide, like the magnitude of homicide, I think is greatly underestimated, and just the pain. And I have great empathy for people who've experienced that kind of loss, and I've been really lucky not to.
These shows that you have, like I'm looking down the list, and they're fantastic shows. So we've got the Long Island serial killer, the Stalkers Web. Let's talk about Stalkers Web real quick, because I just couldn't believe, it kind of reminded me a little bit of Tinder swindler a little bit, just the lies and the manipulation and everything that happens on the line. And I couldn't believe as this story was unfolding, it's talking about the story of Jason Christopher Hughes, probably the worst case of cyber stalking that I've ever heard for decades on dozens of, just so many people that I can't believe that this, you watch these shows and you can't believe that somebody's life is like that, where they would perpetrate the crime. But I can't imagine the sheer hell and terror that the victims went through. This Jason Christopher Hughes case, incredible.
Yeah, that one, it was really alarming because you have to understand the type of individual with the drive to do that and how many balls in the air you have to have hundreds of accounts and passwords and keep up with your harassment and, terrorizing of so many victims and how little it took to become a victim was just shocking. And I think unless you've come across someone exactly like him, you would never believe that someone would care enough to do this like he has for so many decades. I think the most fascinating part of that story is how he clung to his fourth grade pen pal and basically stalked her for 40 years. It's just unheard of. And, I empathized the second I spoke to the first victim of Jason Christopher Hughes. Her name is Rachel. Mm-hmm. She was a big part of our series. I was just enthralled with curiosity about how he did it, why he did it, the time he spent and whether that's worth it, it's just, I've never seen so much spite in an individual before. And, I really enjoyed that show because it also proves that you don't need a body to tell a good crime story. People are suffering even if they're not being killed also. I think that demonstrates two important aspects of true crime that aren't super common.
Right. You don't need physical harm to be a victim. And these people went through just decades, like I said, of emotional trauma, excruciating torture from this guy, of just being bothered constantly for decades from his wrath. And what's weird about it is, like, when I was watching it, you just think back in your day, like, did I flip off the wrong guy in traffic? Did I cut off the wrong person? Did I say something to somebody? You know what I mean? Like, these weren't like big, huge fights and life altering events for these people. These were like casual, not even acquaintances, but casual interactions where he was just in a mood and he picked you. Did you ever think like working on this case or anything, like you might incur his wrath or something like that? Like, were you ever worried about this guy, like, personally?
Absolutely. I mean, to say I was worried about it, no, but I'm expecting it. But I'm not as vulnerable in that way. Mm-hmm. People are already mean to me on the internet. Like, if you have a podcast, if you have a TV, if you're on TV for something, people find reasons to say horrible things. People get trolled no matter what. So I'm just sort of used to it, and it's fine. It was way more worth it for us to tell the story. And another, thing that I think people fail to recognize about the victims of these types of predators is just like your livelihood is affected. Many of the victims have been fired several times because of him. Destroying relationships, having family, you become a liability. So people alienate themselves from you. Like, if I'm close to you, he's going to start harassing me. Several times he went after victims' siblings, boyfriends, girlfriends, you name it. So it makes you a liability to be around. It's very isolating, destroys your ability to make money, and destroys your reputation online. And if you have a bad reputation online, employers, it's the first thing they do is they Google you. So it's just, it really is a crippling thing that he does. So and those stories are important too. So we were really lucky that we had the opportunity to tell that story.
Oh, absolutely. And I felt so bad for I think it was Rachel was she the one that was the victim of the revenge porn?
Yes.
Yes. I mean, the most intimate, private details of your life sent to your boss and coworkers, through the email. It's, I was just watching that and I just couldn't believe the sheer hate that was filled with inside this man to express it in such a way. But your show did not shy away from telling the story, which I'm glad you did. You didn't sugarcoat it at all. You didn't assume any details, for the watchers to pick up on. I mean, it was all kind of laid out there, just like a real investigative. Well, I mean, I don't mean like a real investigative report, but it was an investigative report.
I know what I'm saying. I know what you mean.
I mean, you just laid it all totally out there. So there was there's no gray area with Jason, what was going on. So, that was really important. And I was going to bring up the fact that it was a true crime show that did not feature a murder or a body or heinous acts of violence or anything like that. But it was just they are victims nonetheless. And for you to include that aspect on your investigations, hats off to you. I really enjoyed that one. I thought it was really well done.
Thank you. Yeah, we were really happy to be able to do it.
Yeah, my wife is binging Mystery at the Mansion right now. I watched it without her. And so
what'd you guys think?
I thought it was really good. I don't want to give too much away because that's one of your relatively newer ones. But the whole story with Mr. Ward and the situation surrounding the death of his wife and the whole mystery in the mansion, I can't imagine what it must be like to interview the family of him, the wife, and I mean, just to interview the daughters and to talk to everybody. I know that you're doing a job and you've got to get to the truth and you got to get to the story, but you guys also have some palpable compassion for the fact that these people did lose a member of their family and the mystery surrounding it, to the side, but just the compassion that you have, but also getting the job done, telling the story, investigating the facts and getting the truth out there.
Thank you. Yeah, that's very important to me. I think I am sort of a bleeding heart. And I would say between Billy and I, that is always the role that I take. I mean, I met the daughters of Bob and Diane Ward, and that's how I was introduced to this story long before Unraveled was even on the radar. And I connected with them very much because, they're victims in the story, but they weren't treated like it. Immediately they were sort of people wanted them to pick a side in this story. And it's just, there is no right side for them. They love both their parents. They believe in their dad. And, I think the outcome of the show, validates what they've theorized all along. But, it's one of those very polarizing stories. It's very similar to like the staircase or the case against Adnan. It's like people either, it's a hill they will die on. They believe he is guilty or they believe he is innocent. You know what I mean? There's nothing you can do to convince someone who has their mind made up. And it's for that reason, that story was intriguing. And I think the most important thing for me with that series was no one has ever given Mallory and Sarah, the daughters of Bob and Diane Ward, the opportunity to tell their side of the story. They've been featured in, sound ups and in, split seconds clips here and there, but they've never had a chance to actually tell people their perspective on what happened. And I'm really honored that I was able to give that to them because that's all they wanted, and it's super vulnerable to trust, a couple of journalists and producers with your life. The stakes are so high for them. They care so much and they trusted us, and all they wanted was to tell their side of the story, and they were able to do it, and they were very happy with the outcome. So that was the most important thing to me. And of course, Diane, the truth for Diane, who lost her life in this scenario. And, I think we did the case its due by giving it, that was actually our longest podcast. We did nine hours on that one.
So when you're doing something like this, and I've asked other documentary filmmakers this before, when you're working on something like this, do you have, I'm sure you have a synopsis that you want to follow. You want to kind of go the timeline of the case, interview major people, key players, and kind of explore the truth or look for the truth. But do you have an idea of like where you're going or what you think about the case, and then have it maybe radically shift after you've talked to some people or some witnesses or unearth some different clues or go down a different road or a rabbit hole? Has that ever happened where you're like, man, we need to rethink this. Let's like pump the brakes. We need to, after talking to somebody, we need to, maybe re-examine some of the evidence and look where it might be taking us.
Yeah, I'd say we do our best to do like pre-interviews before we go. So we sort of know how to be prepared in each scenario. But there have been several instances where we learned something brand new while we're conducting an interview, and that leads to another interview. And they're like, oh, I know someone who was there, and that leads to another interview. And especially when we did Unraveled Long Island Serial Killer, I mean, we went and we lived there for 6 weeks, day in, day out. We were just making the calls, moving the needle on that one. So yes, we don't always know what's going to happen. Interviews fall out. We have to chase new people down. We're finding, documentation of new evidence in real time. Someone shows up with a photo we didn't know about. That happens all the time in the best kind of ways.
We brought up a couple times the Long Island serial killer case. And, I'm into true crime. I follow these things, and this is not an old case, but I'm surprised after watching it. I think I even paused it and turned to my wife and was like, I don't really know hardly anything about this case. Like this was all new to me. I might have heard that there was a Long Island serial killer, but I had no idea that there was 10 to 16 or so bodies that were deposited, and there's rumored to be more, and just everything with the police. And how did that, maybe I'm just being naive, and that could be, but I just couldn't believe that is under the radar in terms of like serial killer cases. And what a powerful story. What an incredible story that starts off with like an acquaintance of yours had like a small little part in there. And that's how you start the show. I just couldn't believe that all that happened without me knowing more about it, but great show.
It's really quite a story, and I have some theories about why you may not have heard of it, why maybe it's kind of regional, like Northeast people from the Northeast are pretty familiar, but it's, the victims are primarily sex workers. So depending on, the coverage or, the media and how conservative the media that's covering crime is, there may be people who are not covering it. And, there was about, maybe a 10-year stretch with no developments. The Suffolk County Police Department, which was the investigating agency, released no information. Nothing was done, which was part of, our thesis in Unraveled Long Island Serial Killer. But we were investigating why it wasn't solved. And I think that answer is also why it wasn't covered adequately. I think it's the same reasons. And that is, corruption, people in power sweeping things under the rug. I mean, I could go on and on.
Earlier, you mentioned the importance of system questioning. And there's a lot of questioning political systems, police systems, law enforcement. There's a lot of questioning going on in Long Island Serial Killer.
Yeah, there are. And there's a lot of corruption, and there's a lot of documented evidence of it. This isn't theory. This isn't myth. The high brass in law enforcement in both the DA's office and the Suffolk County Police Department, at the two top people at the time of the investigation went to jail and is out, and one just recently went to jail, the DA. That's unheard of for the police chief and the DA to go to jail they also conspired with the chief anti-corruption aide in Suffolk County, and he's in jail too. So it's really just the hubris is shocking, the arrogance. And, in some ways, which is really sad, it's kind of a microcosm of what happens. And I'm sure many police departments, police unions have so much power, they wield it. And I think there's a lot to be learned. I'm really attached to that installment of Unraveled. That one was a passion project of mine since, for a long time. So I'm so grateful that we were able to do that, because I think there's this idea that maybe political corruption is boring. Well, it's not boring when it ties into an unsolved a serial killer case.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, it was interesting with the investigation as it kind of was going, and when you were kind of detailing the crimes and how they found the four at once on the beach, and just all that. Then you add in political corruption, malfeasance by the police department, just everything else. And then, like I mentioned earlier, you had a friend from middle school that you kind of just kind of lost track. I mean, we all lose track of old friends and things like that, or schoolmates. But to have him be featured somewhat prominently in the investigation. I mean, nothing to do with the murders, but just his interaction with, I don't want to give tons away, but just to give his interaction or talk about his interaction with the police chief and the rumored evidence that he might have had. I mean, it was just, it was like an onion, you just keep peeling back these layers. And I just couldn't believe that. You might have heard about these things a lot in the 60s or the 50s or the 70s or the 80s, but this is in the 2000s, I just couldn't believe that this kind of, I watch a lot of true crime. I don't know why I'm surprised, but I just couldn't believe that all this was happening 21st century America. And, but it just shows like the power of the old boy network for sure, especially back East.
Yeah, and there's something unique about Long Island in that way. For people who aren't familiar, it's an island and it's attached to the city, and the strength of how much money the police are making also plays into it. It's one of the highest paid police departments in the country, and they are too powerful. Mm-hmm. But yeah, that story, and that's a story that I was making those revelations in real time. So it was just a wild ride to be sort of sucked down that rabbit hole and then get to show that story to the world, because it really just demonstrates what is going on behind these closed doors, in these government meetings and police meetings and war rooms. It's happening. If it happens there, it's happening everywhere.
Sure. You mentioned closed doors, and you and James are sitting there knocking on the front door of the police chief right on his porch trying to get the answers from. So it's not just you guys sitting back in a TV studio with a green screen behind you, just kind of reporting what you've written down. You guys are out in the field trying to pin down somebody and trying to get an answer.
We are. I mean, we're trying to hold people's feet to the fire. And in the same token, we're also trying to give people their due, their opportunity to speak, to defend themselves, to prove us wrong, to point to the real person at fault. Whatever it is, we give them that opportunity. And usually they're not taking it because we're pretty spot on about the investigative sort of thread we're pulling on. But yeah, it was riveting to be able to do that. And I think that does make our show unique too. Yeah. We're very hands-on. We're very embedded in the story, and it's active. I mean, it's happening as we're shooting it. It's not produced in that way.
Right. So I had the opportunity with this podcast. I had the opportunity to watch a pre-screening of your new show, Once a Killer, The Unraveled, the new one that's coming out, and it holds up. It's just like the quality of the other ones. We watched it last night, my wife and I, and a different kind of story. But I couldn't believe, again, just how these cases unfold and everything. 250,000 unsolved murders in the United States, and so you guys are kind of taking a look at the phenomenon maybe of a one and done killer. Somebody that, for whatever reason, has a murder or commits a crime like this, and just how the police departments are sometimes just handcuffed by that, and they have no other leads. They have no profiles to go on. And even you guys start talking about forensic profilers, how they don't have much to work on. So they start going down a wrong path. And it's incredible, these stories that come out, and how you guys are able to follow them down different investigative avenues.
Yeah, that one is fascinating because I really do think this concept of a one and done killer, right, has only really been, this archetype was sort of revealed with the birth of genetic genealogy, because there's no solving a case with DNA if somebody only hits once, and they never commit a violent crime where they leave DNA behind again. Possibly if they commit a felony and you're in a state where they collect DNA as a felon, then maybe they'll get you. But if you kill someone, if you kill a child, a woman, a man once, and then decide, oop, that wasn't for me, and with a crime with a sexual overtone, perhaps, if you don't do it again, how are the police going to catch you? And it's something that profilers didn't know existed. And we just thought that was interesting. And it's like, how many of those 250,000 unsolved cases are these one and dones, and what are we going to do about it? And how many people are living with killers? We interviewed the ex-wife of one such killer, and it was so alarming because, a lot of us have partners at home, and imagine finding that out about your partner. It's harrowing. It's terrifying. And I think that's everybody's worst nightmare. You live like a quiet, calm life. You think you're out of danger, and somebody could be sleeping next to you with a secret that is, beyond evil. So I think that intrigues most people because that is not what we're taught killers do. So it just kind of defies the tropes we're all used to in true crime. And that's new. I mean, it's with genetic genealogy, and we're seeing these cases in newspapers being solved every day. Preacher killed a little girl when he was, 18, and he's caught in his 60s or when he's already died. Mm-hmm. It's fascinating. And there has to, if everybody puts their heads together, there has to be a better way to catch them. Otherwise, many are going to get away with it.
Sure. You guys are real advocates for genealogy forensics. And,
yeah,
I had a guest a couple episodes ago, Dr. Kathleen Ramsland, and she was talking about the BTK Killer. And the BTK Killer, as you well know, was finally nabbed because they had the genetic DNA from his crimes. When they were committed, they had no way of really testing for DNA, but they were able to subpoena his daughter's
pap smear.
Yeah, medical exam. I was going to say, but yeah, we're real. they were able to subpoena that from her college in order to make the genetic matchup between the evidence and Dennis Rader. So I wonder is there I don't know, maybe not. I'm just thinking out loud.
No, I mean, let me just weigh in on that. So I interviewed BTK's daughter for the first degree.
Yeah.
We did a 3-hour 3-parter with her. Yeah, I think there are ethical problems with that. That really hurt her, as I'm sure anyone can understand. Not because she wouldn't want her dad to get caught, but because it's this tangible. She helped catch her dad against her will.
Right.
So again, like people can opt out of having their DNA in a public database. I think looking at BTK as an example, it was more important to catch him than preserve her feelings. You know what I mean? I think if everybody can agree, like he's killed children, I think it was important. Do I think they could have gotten a surreptitious sample from him some other time and it spared her additional trauma? Probably. They probably could have. I wish they had. It was really hard for her and I empathize greatly, but she knows what her dad is and she understands that, like he needed to be caught. And I do think there needs to be boundaries with genetic genealogy and genetic investigations. And I think privacy is also, keenly important, but so is catching, child murderers and rapists and serial killers.
Sure.
So there's just got to be a balance somewhere.
Now, this is all coming out on the Unraveled Once a Killer. Now, you have a podcast that's going to be dropping April 20th about that. Is that right? Does that sound right?
I think date-wise, that is right. Or maybe that's the last podcast episode airs April 20th. I think it comes out sooner. I think the last one airs then.
I'm never going to tell somebody to turn off my podcast and turn on somebody else's, but in this rare instance, I think everybody needs to start listening to, if you haven't already, you need to start listening to Unraveled, because like we've been talking about the past 40 minutes, there's these incredibly intricate stories that are laid out 7, 8, 9 episodes, 2-hour documentaries, same thing, but there's not a sense of rehashing. They're two different presentations of the same material. So it's whatever you want to consume or both. This last one though, fantastic work with the work comparing like intuition of the cops, the old gumshoe kind of old school work of the detective versus the new genetic science on what, like chasing evidence for months. No, now we can probably get our answer in a couple days, hopefully, with genetic science. So it's kind of neat seeing how the detective work is going hand in hand with the modern forensics. Do you see much pushback from police departments using that, or do you think as time goes on, it's just not only easier, cost effective, but just more effective?
I think good cops are happy to explore any resource available to them. I think the barriers and the obstacles a lot of them are facing are funding, budgetary restrictions, which don't, it takes a lot of time. Some genetic genealogy can't really be done if the paper trail is not there. Sometimes it can be done. It takes months and months and months of someone working on it full time, and they're not cops. They're genealogists. And it's expensive. So I think it needs to be made more of a priority. I think people need to find money to do it. And I think the good cops want to use it. I'm sure there's old school cops who are maybe threatened to buy it, who knows? I haven't seen any pushback, but there's always a couple of bad apples.
Well, I'm sure.
Yeah. Undoubtedly.
Now, as we go forward, you're getting ready for this. You just finished this. It's coming out and everything. Do you get to take a break before you deep dive into your next case? Or are you guys already?
Never taken a break. No, we're hoping to be able to do more, fingers crossed, but no, we're deep in a bunch of new, amazing, just as riveting stories as what we were able to do in the first, 5 installments of Unraveled. So we're just finding crazier and crazier stories every day. And somehow you didn't think you could, but life is stranger than fiction. So we're working on some really awesome stuff now.
Well, that's good. Well, my hat's off to you. You guys got, what's great is that you have this responsible reporting, investigation. Like I said, that's also keeps a clear eye to the victims of these crimes. And I think that's important. And that's one thing that I really wanted to have you on the show because I was a big fan of that. I thought, well, that's great. And that's responsible reporting, great investigative work. And you guys are, like I said, knocking on people's doors, trying to get the truth. I mean, you guys don't shy away from it.
Thank you. Yeah. I mean, everything is for the victims. Everything is to try to reduce the number of lives stolen, lives impacted by the trauma and pain of having a loved one killed, of being stalked, of having your life ruined by, some cruelly driven monster. That's the purpose of all of this. Or, but if you look at, the expert series we did, that is a very unique story. I think that was season 3 we did. What's most interesting about that is that everybody thinks they're the good guy in that story.
Right.
The prosecutors, the cops, the judge, everyone thinks that they are fighting for justice. And that is unique among the others. The monsters are way less clear cut there. That is really demonstrative of, the system is sort of broken there.
Oh, absolutely. I know we didn't mention that one or have time to really talk about that one, but I was listening to there's one about 8 spots of blood splatter expert. And, what happens if the expert is mistaken? What happens to your life then?
That case terrified me, because and I think it's dangerous in that, to give some context, we're exploring the various forensic sciences and the validity of the science really. And once you learn so much of it is subjective, it's a lot scarier. We hear forensic science and it seems like clear cut, no questions left, but it's very subjective. It's completely vulnerable to human error. And if this guy who you referenced with the 8 tiny specks of blood can end up in jail, anyone can, because he was a police officer.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So I know we're getting for the end of the time here, but I just want everybody to check out Unraveled. We've got Long Island serial killer, the Stalkers Web, experts on trial, mystery at the mansion, and now coming up, Unraveled, once a killer. Quite a body of work there, Alexis.
Thank you. And thank you so much for having me on. It's been a true delight talking to you.
Well, I appreciate that very much. And please give my best to Billy Jensen. What a guy.
I will for sure.
All right. Well, thank you very much. And we'll talk to you again sometime.
Thank you.
Well, there we go, everybody. Episode 222 on the Necronomicast. Unraveled with Alexis Linkletter. Really had a great time talking to Alexiss on and off the mic. Fantastic, captivating, compelling true crime journalism. So proud to have her on the show. Next up on the show, oh my goodness gracious, as I live and breathe, I hope you're sitting down. My guest for the next episode, episode 223, Monsignor Stephen J. Rossetti, author of Diary of an American Exorcist, Demons, Possessions, and the Modern-Day Battle Against Ancient Evil. Not necessarily true crime. I don't know if you'd call it paranormal. Supernatural? Scary as hell? Check. So that's what's going on with the Necronomicast for the next episode, dropping in a couple of weeks. Hope everything's going well with you. Spring is here in Omaha. Spring, then summer, and then fall will bring the historic Haunted Heartland live event. Hope you're making plans to join us down here in Omaha in October. But in the meantime, enjoy your life. Have a great day. I see the sun peeking up over the horizon. It's time for this old man to get some sleep.